on the air. It surprises us every time. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 139. It's our weekly podcast. We discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And Vince, you did an awesome job last week.
What? Okay. So I'm not fired.
That's not up to me exactly. No, it was great, man. I've been gone, so I went away, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But I only got to see a little bit of the show this morning, and it was like, check you and Chase out. We're just rocking the show, man.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Talked about some stuff. Talked about some fun things in the world with AI music composers, and what Roland is doing with the Roland Cloud, and all sorts of stuff. It's always a fun world in the game audio universe.
It is, especially when Roland is involved, or Windows, but we'll come back to that. little stab there. Hey, Mike, what's going on? Where you been?
I've been not far from here, actually, just I've been working on so much game audio that I didn't have any time to talk about it, irony as that is.
And that's a good thing, right? Too much work is a good thing. And that's what we love about the show, is just come and go as it works out for your schedule, because we gotta keep working.
Well, that's weird, because this email you sent, it's all capital letters, and there's a lot of expletives saying, if I don't get back on the show this week, there's going to be, I can't say this word, but anyway, you're very passionate. I don't really understand the disconnect here between your mellow attitude and your communications behind the scenes.
My wife sent that email. So Alex May, sir,
gentlemen,
where have you been? And I love the mustache.
I have been around the world and back. I'm actually... I am actually back. I'm in Japan at the moment. I'm not in Sweden. Things have been, apparently, it turns out it's not so easy to move to Europe as I thought it would be. No, actually, in reality, we're just tidying up a few of the last remaining bits and pieces that are needed for me to finally start work and set up life in Europe. So I'm actually temporarily back in Japan, standing by at the moment while the Swedish government gets their act together and organizes the last few bits and pieces. So I'm back here. And that is the reason that I am able to join you fine people this morning. It's been like, what has it been, 6 months, I think, since I was here last?
Too long.
And more like 6 years.
I just jumped into our Game Audio Hour thing and saw that we have a fellow demo scene tracker user joining the show today. And I thought, well, today might be a good time for me to make a bit of a reappearance.
Siren, Alexander Brandon. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, man. I've heard legendary tales of the stuff of legend of Game Audio Hour, and so thanks for inviting. This is fantastic. I know you said something about describing, past backgrounds and everything. But, I think I've only really met Vincent on this little shindig. I actually want to get to know you guys too, and and everything about your histories and all your techniques. What your favorite color of Wise is, and all that
stuff. Yeah, that is an option with Unity, isn't it? Multiple colors. Can't you do that now?
Yeah, I think I can start there. My favorite color of Wise is like a chundrous. I work on VR stuff, so my favorite color is sort of like a chundrous sort of, multicolored rainbow kind of color.
Chundrous. I'm writing that down.
That is actually in VR development. That's at least in the company that I'm at the moment. That's an actual adjective that we use on a daily basis. Is how chundrous is this?
Oh my God! What is it? What is it? What is it? A combination of chundrous?
Chundrous is a combination of. Well, you really want me to know? It depends on what you had for lunch, Kyle.
I'm guessing thunderous and childish?
No, it's chunder. No, it's it depends on what you had for lunch, Kyle.
I don't want to know. This has gone too far.
Can we call Alex the chunder from down under?
No.
Oh, jeez. You may for the next 50 minutes. You may.
Chunder.
So we got Alex. I'm going to refer to Alexander on occasion just to differentiate between the two. Alexander. Start me at the beginning, man. We actually met once, super long time ago, gang event, and I was taken by how charming and positive and happy and talented you are, I was like, this guy, you know, this kind of like, and I bring you up, and this is a true story. I bring you up in conversation as, you know, because we all get down once in a while. And I think this is a guy who I met in one time and already filled me with more joy in that moment. You know, I'm not trying to be all cheesy and weird, but these guys will tell you I get cheesy and weird. But that was absolutely a true statement. And I try to tell people, you know, no matter what you do for a living, whether it's, you know, counting your money or digging ditches, you're going to have moments where you're kind of like, ugh. But you never seem to actually lose that positive spirit. I love that. And so I guess in some weird way, I'm bringing it back to like the beginning of music for you and choosing it as a career. And has it always been this positive experience for you? Can you take us back and bring us and how are you so naturally happy? How's that first?
Oh man. That's that. No, I want to say, well, first of all, thank you. Do I sound like a droid right now, by the way?
No. Sounds good.
Because sometimes my connection can be all weird. So yeah, so yes, thank you. I really appreciate the compliment, and that I try to do that when I can. And you know, I guess that's part of the nature of what I, you know, at least you know, the face that I put on as much as humanly possible with others. You know, when I'm left to myself, of course, I'm crying all the time. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, we all have our down times, and it's funny that you mentioned so. Oh my gosh, the what is that? That glass you've got is the
Oh yeah, it's the Glencairn.
What's it called again? The Glencairn. That's right. Yes, I got a couple for Christmas, man. I'm so scotching it up next time. So anyway.
Oh, we gotta do that. It's on me next time.
With that in mind, getting back to the way back, there was a lot of us, I believe, started because of passion that comes from youth. You know, like you know, your interests in your youth for all things entertainment congeal in different ways. And in my case, it was the inspiration from not just, you know, taking piano lessons, which is really sort of my, you know, the earliest part of my musical background in choir, to getting an ad lib synthesizer card in '87. I was like, wow, this is the ability to actually write music, and I don't have to spend, I believe the price of a Fairlight CMI was $27,000. So like you've got around the same time, well, maybe before a little bit, but you know, if you've got Gabriel outfitting a studio for $200,000, and I'm like, oh, that's never going to happen. But I love games like Metroid and, you know, early arcade games and sort of golden age arcade games as well. I used to take a tape recorder to arcades and record Road Blasters and Ninja Warriors and Vapor Trail, and all of that sort of led to when I got the ad lib. I was like, I've got to, you know, just use this and start writing stuff. And I just wrote songs, which is, you know, I eventually just took those songs and put them into an album that's on Bandcamp, and people actually bought it. It's like 20 songs for $10, but I was like, wow, you know, it's a fascinating thing. So that started the trend towards learning trackers and on the Amiga and getting into that world. And then eventually the trackers led to Unreal and Deus Ex. Yes, Alex May is given the, we're going to talk because I need to remember what your handle was and whatever IRC stuff, circles we ran in, because I talk to people that are just like, oh, I was on Pound Sign Tracks, and I'm like, I don't remember because there were no faces like there are on Google Hangouts. But anyway, like that led to Unreal and Deus Ex because of the specifics of that technology. It wasn't because I was like the most amazing musician by any means, but people took what I did just as they took what Bobby Prince did for Doom, and they thought, oh wow, this is really, really cool. And you know, obviously Mick Gordon is taking that, you know, to stratospheric heights with the stuff that he's done for the latest Doom. But like now, you know, like when you get to, now that we're in this big soup of you know, like I can talk to, if I really, you know, start rapping on his door repeatedly, I can chat with people like Bear McCreary and John Ottman and other folks that are in film and television, and just be like, we're all one big family now, and we're all kind of sharing each other's cereals and trying to figure out how do we make it in here. And it's, of course, it's super, super competitive at the top end, low end, with everybody trying to get into the indie scene. And so, like, it's like I'm actually going to be interviewing Stefan Schutz, there's Australians everywhere. I'm going to be interviewing him for Network. We're going to be doing sort of a mentorship thing, except it's not for people trying to get in. It's for people that have been doing it for a while, and they're like, how do I keep paying my bills?
Yeah.
And how do I keep from overworking and spending all of my time in the production slog of, it's not too bad for a while, and then I'm spending 12 hours a day for like however many months on end. So like all of us have, as far as I know, all of us have tasted that, if not been steeped in it, and then gone, oh my gosh, I'm getting paid way too little for the amount of experience that I have or the amount of work that I'm doing. And so that's kind of what I'm delving into now, is the fact that if you guys are familiar with Business Skills for Composers, which is run by Zhao Li and Adam Gubman, and it's a really great Facebook resource.
Yeah.
You see all the time there's this go-getter, you got to be hustle. How do you hustle this? How do you get the best rate for that? How do you do this? And Chance Thomas is like, oh my gosh, go. And, and so I decided, I'm actually going to take a step back and sort of like definitely not work, because I can't, and none of us can, but like start to really get philosophical and thoughtful and chill about, wait a second. Okay, the new thing when we were kids was like, oh, this awesome technology that was available for the first time, that was doing things that nobody had seen before. Now we all have the same toys, so what do we do? What's the new thing? And that's like, I'm sure on this show, not least notably on this show a number of times, and it's sort of something that I really want to delve into across the board, not just for this industry but for other industries. Right now is really trying to not just share what I do, which I'm happy to expound upon what my plans for the future are, but also to find out from people like Stefan Schutz, like what do you do? What does Andrew Barnabas do? What does Charles Deenan do?
Yeah.
All those guys. I sort of want to get this knowledge base and not just hand it out in pamphlets, but at least try to make people aware that like just because you've been doing this a while doesn't mean it can't all. And what the heck do you do then?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's an illusion.
That's it in a nutshell.
Oh, sorry about that. I jumped on your line. I think sometimes there's an illusion that you can reach a point where things get easier. They don't necessarily happen. In my experience in game audio, that hasn't happened. And Mike will attest to this, because Mike is my sounding board for when I get depressed about promoting myself and trying to, get the news out there. I'm no good at it. And so I'm embarrassed to do it, but it never stops needing to be done. And so the thing for me is I've always tried to find a way. Oh, Gesundheit. I've always tried to find a subtle, a way to do it that I can be proud, that I don't feel like I'm trying to sell somebody a used car, that they will assume that I'm trying to sell them a used car. But the thing is, I've kind of gone off on a tangent there, but the point I'm trying to make is that it never stops. Yeah. You constantly have to do it. And I have some good friends who are great at it. Friends you also have. Gerard Marino, no doubt whatsoever that guy can hustle, and he's talented. So he just gets out there and does the Gerard thing. And I watch from a distance, and I'm jealous and I laugh at the same time. I go, I don't know how he does it. And then Matt Pearsall is a guy who taught me so much about how to. Yeah, I was reading, speaking of Matt for a second, because he's just one of my favorite people. Somebody said about him that he'll walk into a meeting late. He's so charming that he can walk into a meeting late, look at people and say, all right, here's how we're going to do this, and just take their money.
Now, wait, you're absolutely right about that. What's the policy on certain on the show?
Oh, no. Open forum.
No Swahili.
No.
Okay. So this is seriously, and it's not like I go around swearing like a sailor or anything like that, but like legend has it that Matt Pearsall walked into a meeting with whoever it was, with whatever, and actually said, okay, dicks, this is what we're gonna do. And sits down and back and says, here's the deal. But the funny thing is I talk to people about him and they go, man, he's such an asshole. But That's because he has a sense of humor and a sense of sarcasm that rubs people sometimes the wrong way.
Yeah.
When you understand that that's the case, and if you actually say, "Oh, dude, did you mean that?" He'll be like, "Oh, totally. No, I love you and you're fantastic and da 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 da."
That is so true.
Yes, we'll go back on the.
Yeah, I think that's
so true. That is so Matt, and he's so talented, and he's just so good at getting you on board that he doesn't have an intro into a meeting or into a conversation that really isn't available to him. He could start it with with a comment like that, or he could start it by hugging you. Matt is so talented, and he can back up everything, and it's just an amazing thing to experience. And I've tried to take a little bits and pieces from him.
Yeah, that's,
but anyway,
I think the thing that the key takeaways from people like Matt, especially Vince as well, is that if you can be passionate and enthusiastic about what you're doing, just speaking with you in itself is like an advertisement. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the limited time that I've had with Matt Pearsall, is that he's so passionate about it, and he's genuinely interested in anything that you have to say about game audio or games that you like, or way that, music or sound effects production or whatever you want to talk about. He's really interested. And I think I guess the best advice you could give to somebody who's having difficulty finding that way to promote themselves is to just find the part of what you do that you really, really like. It may not be all of it, doesn't have to be all of it. You may not like sound effects production, you may not like writing music, maybe you like mixing, or maybe you just like microphones, whatever. If you just find that specific, that specific thing that you like, and show people that enthusiasm that you have for your choice of microphones, or your choice of DRW or whatever, that really carries it through. And that's definitely something I learned from Vince and from Matt, because these two guys, that Vince guy right there, sitting right there, you spend like 10 minutes with him, and all you want to think about is, got to get back to my computer, not because I don't enjoy being with this man, but because I just want to do stuff, because he's doing stuff, and I've got to do stuff and keep up with him.
Well, we have absolutely making the point. It's so important to keep promoting yourself, do it in a positive manner, which is where I was going with that, with Alex, is I was saying that it's just, I think the only time I met you, and it was very short, it was at like a Gang Awards or something, and you went up with this like velvet, or maybe satin jacket, and it had some crazy thing written on the back of it. Do you remember what I'm talking about? It was like,
wait, okay, so we did have,
like 2005.
we did have gang vests.
Yeah. I think that's what it was.
That was leather, and Tommy had those made.
Oh, gotcha. Well, I was in the crowd, and then we talked afterwards, and you just imbued me with all this positive spirit. It was amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I mean, what you're positive about might change. Like, one day, like I say in the back of my head, and I keep getting reminded of this. Like, all I have to do is I subscribe to Sound on Sound, because I think that that's a really good, fairly honest magazine about a lot of different things. They got a little bit of a slant towards, this product is mostly great, but it's got a few issues, when in fact the few issues might be very major, but they don't really harsh on anybody. Yeah. But I load it up and I read it. It's the same stuff for the most part that I was reading about roughly 10 to 15 years ago, like speakers, preamps, DAW software, auto-tune, sample libraries, all of this stuff that I'm just like, oh my gosh, that Dave Smith instrument looks so sexy, and yet, wait a minute, 2.0, 3 or 4 months ago, and I barely scratched the surface on it. Yeah. I got myself what's that? There's a VST that is similar to it's not OBX. Is it OBX?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So I got OBX, like the pro version of OBX, which supposedly could do anything OBX synthesizers actually did. And I heard the demos and I was blown away. I haven't cracked that open. There's Shreddage, which I'm just like, I can finally go and make that Afterburner type remix soundtrack that I've always wanted to do, and I don't even have to play, guitar. So like when it comes to like really clean stuff, I'll go in there and I'll have fun with Cubase, and I'll apply Shreddage, and it'll sound incredible. So like things in bits and pieces, but then I look at what is new,
Yeah.
and what the Yamaha Montage is the most amazing new synth. The next Korg synth is going to be amazing. The next VST is going to be amazing. What is the best orchestral library? And I'm just like, maybe that's not what it is. Maybe I really need to shift my focus. Go, okay, well, I'm watching the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on one day, or I'm listening to some very creative use of a soundtrack, Slave, and then I'm like, oh, who is the composer on this? Hans Zimmer? I'm supposed to hate Hans Zimmer. We're all supposed to hate Hans Zimmer. He's supposed to be formulaic, and he's supposed to make his organs too loud. And I'm just like, no, wait a minute. I'm actually getting something new because I think Hans is in the same boat as we are. And he's like, no, I'm not doing the same backdraft soundtrack that I've done since the 90s.
Yeah.
I'm really got to do something different. Hey, I'll make an organ really loud.
Absolutely.
I mean, love him or hate him, he's trying to do different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially there's this sense of like, okay, what the heck is new? Because it's not an ad-lib anymore. It's not an NES 2A03 sound chip. It's not any of the stuff that really got us excited. It's really like, okay, well, and if it's not an orchestra, what the heck is it? Like I'm playing Zelda and I hear like a little piano theme play and then silence, and I actually kind of like it, even though there's people that are going, there's no standard Zelda themes the way there should be because I'm a Zelda purist.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I've gotten back into Zelda and haven't played it since Ocarina of Time. Maybe that keeps things fresh up here. So yeah, I think the moral of everything I've been trying to say is just like, if we're all on the same sort of big expedition into this big frontier of there's got to be some sort of big fundamental shift that eventually lead to like what we might consider something that creatively satisfies us, as opposed to things that we've been doing for the last 100 years. That's my challenge now. That's what I am. That's why I'm not like, consistently going, oh, listen to my new rehashed this or that. It's like, I'm kind of, I'm doing this with you guys because I love talking about this, but I'm not releasing a ton of new content. I'm working on certain things that, that I can't talk about.
Yeah.
There's other things that I can, that I like, no matter what the client is. Yeah. No matter what the client is, I go to them and I'm just like, all right, here's just an idea that actually sounds crazy. And they're like, okay, let's either no, we don't have the budget, or let's try that idea.
I think it's wonderful.
I encourage everyone to do that.
Absolutely. I was listening to one of my favorite artists is Brian Ferry or Roxy Music. And I was listening to Brian Ferry on the way home today. And there's this particular song I was listening to where in the opening part of the song, he plays this little piano, this little dun, 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 dun. That's it. Just these 4 notes. And he plays it on the 4th bar of every measure throughout the entire song, or every, the 4th measure of every, throughout the entire song. He just does it on repeat. And what I thought was really interesting about it was 2 things. And I was wondering your thoughts on this when it comes to composition, is we kind of naturally, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, oh, he should probably not play that again. And then he plays it again. But all of the other stuff that's going on around it is completely different, and it's flowing in and out. And I realized about towards the end of the song, I was like, oh, he's anchoring this entire song on those 4 notes. And it seems like one of those things that you would learn in composition school to never do. Don't introduce the theme, play with it with a different instrument a little bit later, maybe redo it a little bit at the end to give a little hearkening back to what was going on, and then be done with it. Not play it.
Unless it's a few.
Yeah. Not play it every 4 measures. And he's doing it every single time. And I thought to myself 2 things. First of all, that's brilliant because it's melodically very, it matches everything else that's going on in the music. It happens at a weird timing that isn't with the lyric. The singing part of the song is based upon what's happening on the bass end. It's following the bass. And that 4-note little moment is not happening in time with anything else that's going on. So it really stands out. And the other thing I thought is playing this in concert's got to be easy as hell. He's got just this 4 notes on this hand and then the rest of it's over here. But it got me thinking, there's got to be, what is your opinion on stripping back on where you take just a basic thing? How far can you push that? When do you start writing? Do you go, I got 4 notes and I'm just going to play them incessantly and I'm going to change everything around it? Do you ever do anything like that, like experiment in those kind of ways?
That's to be honest, I haven't, because I'm so ADD. I really like the gated stuff, and things get out of hand way too fast. Techniques, and in some cases, I go the opposite direction, but it's not to a single series of notes. It's to just atmospheric pads or soundscapes that just sort of flow, as if, you just like, oh, here's a nice omnisphere patch that I can tweak a little bit. Here's another nice omnisphere patch that I can tweak a little bit. And let's, fade them together, or let's granularize them, or do whatever.
Yeah.
I think you hit on something very interesting as far as stripping back, because just because Vincent is in here, I think I will call out his the guy that he sort of pulled out of the woodwork, Austin Windery, for his work on Journey, because Journey, I went to his Journey in Monaco talk at GDC, and one of the reasons I think he deserves the success and the popularity that he has is not just because he's a freaking uber nice guy. It's disgusting. Not just because he's passionate about the stuff that he does, but he was describing taking something instrumentally. Vincent, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it started more in synthesis, and then gradually became more acoustic as Journey progressed, and everything was done in this very subtle way, in such a subtle way that, you can detect little motifs potentially here and there when specific things happen, but almost everything else is wrapped around, as far as I know, it's like one main theme statement that is really somewhat slowly done, and then repeated and developed throughout the entire game. And it's like, by the time you get to the end, it's this big, it's layered, it's got orchestral stuff going on. It's just really, it's far more emotional. Or it could be, if there's something where you're gliding down a hill really, really fast, and it picks up a little bit and then slows down. I think is one of the ultimate examples of that you were talking about. It's just that it's not stated in that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think the field is open for somebody to try that in using, just one instrument, and see, okay, how can that sort of,
yeah.
I don't know anybody that's done that personally. How about you guys?
I'm going to leave that to Vince now. Vince, you're on mute, though. Let you know.
Man, well done specifically that? Wow. There is something to, what there is to know about music is something that has really changed a lot. Both music as well as game music. And I think this is something that's very relevant to games themselves. What drives games are these systems. And the systems can be these really easily knowable things. Like if you're dealing with very straightforward puzzle games, like, oh, it's a Sudoku game. All right, you understand the system, but how well do you really, really know that system, and do you have a relationship with that? And I think the same thing also happens when it comes to the music component, where you could have a relationship with a piece of music where everything that is in that music is totally knowable, and you have the classic 8-bit games, Mario. Any stuff for the Atari, stuff for the Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo had some thick textures, but it's still 8 channels, and that's what you got. That's it. And a lot of that music is stuff that, okay, there's only so much that's going on, and you can truly know it. And then once we moved out of there, people started playing around with that music, and they made music that sounded really awesome and really creative and really complex. But then the relationship dynamic changed. Is it possible to know something that is that complex? And there are composers that are out there that actually fiercely believe, yes, it is totally possible. And there are other composers who feel, no, it's very important that the listener does have a really intimate connection with the music, that they can really truly know everything that's going on in the music. And I don't want really crazy machinations throughout it all.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in the middle of that, honestly. Looking at how in games we have this revival of the retro. Oh, and it's been sustained throughout, right? People have been talking about retro style games ever since retro was considered retro.
When they weren't retro.
Well, yeah, hey, we got to the PlayStation era, and people are like, "Whoa, look at these really simple games, these simple sprites. That's retro." That was back in the late '90s, and now we still have things that are going back to that aesthetic. And like, okay, it's not just about that aesthetic; it's about that relationship that the players have with that game. And accompanying all that as well, the music. And what are people's relationships with the music? Is it this thing that you have this intimate, totally transparent, on the face of it, yes, I know exactly what's going on, or is it something that's more complex where you can have a relationship with it, but not truly know everything that's going on there, whether it because of the complexity of it, or because of the interactive nature of it, or because of the dynamism of the music in conjunction with the dynamism of the game system itself. We have these huge, insane open world games, and there's going to be dependencies on that with the music, and it will create something that someone hears just once in their lifetime, and that's where they fall in love with the game and its score. And they realize, yes, this is an incredibly rare moment. That is my rare moment, and I will never be able to recreate that again because it's a really complicated, dynamic melody plus dynamic music plus the complexity of the game system. And I'm still doing this game music thing because we're in the middle of this. I don't think I'll ever get to the end of it.
Are there any formulas you guys use? Alex, Vince, Mike, Alex, the other, are there any formulas you use? One time I read an interview with Paul McCartney, and he said that, and I'm paraphrasing, the secret to a good melody is to come down the scale. And ever since then, I started listening for him to do that. And it's amazing how much you listen to songs that were written by Paul McCartney, and his vocal line just falls down, just goes up and then comes down, and then goes up and then comes down. And he just does it over and over and over. And I don't know if it's just a natural thing that he's doing, and therefore he's saying, since I've been successful at it, it's some secret that people want to hear, or if actually he's doing it by design. Do you guys have any formulas that you use in that kind of way where you know what's going to happen?
This is really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this recently. The role of, I guess from a musicological point of view, the role of nostalgia in what we do is quite critical at times. And I think a lot of my wheelhouse is electronic music, and electronic music is a very odd one because you get these little sort of small little repetitive things that come up again, and then all of a sudden you've got a subgenre. You've got like this kind of beat, this kind of bass line. Now it's speed garage from the late 90s. What? Totally arbitrary. It could be absolutely anything. It's a bit like fashion design. You could actually have a fashion trend with people with brown paper bags on their head with like holes cut out for the eyes. And if everybody did it, it would become a trend. Yeah. And then 20 years later, it would come back again.
It was a trend. It was called the Aints, the New Orleans Aints.
There we go. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds good. Anyway, like with nostalgia, especially with electronic music, I remember on the project that we did for Sony a few years ago, there was this bonus that you get where it's a taxi driving game, and all of a sudden this like big ghetto blaster pops up on your car bonnet, and it had to be like 90s acid house, and it doing that one sort of it was like a 20-second loop of just acid house was probably the most fun part of that whole thing, because you take that very well-defined pocket of nostalgia. You need this sound, you need that sound, you got, and then now you have acid house. And it's sort of so easy. So I think that if you're talking about sort of techniques, at least for me, one thing that I am still working on, I'm not very good at it, but this is kind of my personal goal, is to be able to straddle that line nicely between dropping in hints of certain elements of nostalgia for people and sort of doing things that are completely, artistic. That is artistic, meaning nobody really understands it but me. Yeah. And so sort of finding that balance between the two is what I find a useful technique to be using. And when you come down to game audio, then with Vince's talking about retro games, all of a sudden retro games is a thing, and again, this is a result of basically our generation of gamers from the 80s and the 90s sort of growing up. And now we had that heritage because that's where we were playing all these games. Now here we are. We have all the tools available to us, and some of us are privileged with the opportunities to contribute to new game projects and stuff. Here's a retro game. Let's make it sound like it comes out of the 80s or it comes out of the 90s. And then you've got that nostalgia thing playing in again. So I think, the using nostalgia very, very carefully and very, very effectively. For me, anyway, that's what I'm striving towards. I'm not, like I said, I'm not very good at it yet, but that's what I keep trying to practice. Is like sort of taking elements of this that we all know and love from this. And I think, Kyle, a few episodes, like a year ago, we had a discussion where you were very passionate about taking sort of game genres and taking what people expect to hear from this game genre and completely flipping it upside down. So you're basically taking that whole nostalgia thing and throwing it away and replacing it with something totally new. Again, that's basically just an effective usage of nostalgia. In that case, not using this nostalgia, which is an effective usage of it as well.
Well, so, first of all, you said I was, would you say I was passionate about, which means that I was railing against or bitching?
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's what Kyle does. And then, but you're right. And you hinted on what I was going to go back to Alexander about was, because you had spoken about how you're trying to reach into these kind of new areas, and how much is I'm trying to mince my words properly, but it's easy to go back to nostalgia because it's familiar. We can just pick up a game, or we can get on Bandcamp and we can listen to something that has been written in that time or that is reminiscent of that sound, and we can emulate that sound with all of the technology that we have before us. But that seems like a dangerous thing to get into. And I'd love to hear Mike's opinion on this too, because if you go too much into the familiar, it's not necessarily going to be a success, in my opinion. It's just that you have some people who would like to hear that. But I think to themselves, they even maybe don't recognize that they don't want to hear all of that. They want to have this touch of it. They want to have this remembrance maybe of something that they experienced, but they don't want the whole thing just awash in all of this nostalgia. They want something new too. How do you find that balance between taking a genre or just thinking of a soundtrack in a way that is, I see moments where this can be nostalgic, there's a call for the nostalgia, but I'm still going to push forward with something that is true to me and is also new to the experience, so we can keep moving this forward musically through time? Oh, I think
Michael, we haven't even heard from you. Why don't you deal with this one?
I didn't realize I was being called on. So, Carl, when you say nostalgia, do you mean conventionality, or do you mean nostalgia in the sense of conventionality from a long time ago?
Well, that is the trick, isn't it? Because I said it on purpose, because nostalgia is in the ear of the beholder. What one person finds is nostalgic, another person doesn't. And so it's very difficult, although the word nostalgia is used in text or in descriptions from audio directors, it doesn't necessarily point to anything specific, does it? So maybe we depend upon, maybe to answer your question, I'm saying whatever would be nostalgic to you. If you were doing another game that was Pac-Man-like and the audio director said, let's add a little nostalgia to there, would you make that soundtrack would you have these moments of this classic Pac-Man sound and then mix it with some kind of modern version? And where's that crossover, and how much would you do of each? And have you been in that situation?
Well, I have, in that I did some music for a Star Trek game, an official Star Trek game. And in that scenario, there's this big body of precedent, a number of movie scores and TV scores. And at the time, there's some game scores as well. And the question I faced is, how much am I drawing from what's been done stylistically, and how much am I pushing the envelope? I think the answer will just have to depend on the aesthetics of your client and what you're doing. If you're doing a beer commercial, you're probably not pushing the edge. If you're doing a game that's in a very well-defined genre, kind of another World War II game or whatever you have, for a large client or a large publisher, the more decision makers you add, the more conservative things are likely to become, barring a couple of visionaries pushing the flock forward. So chances are a lot's going to depend on the person hiring you. You may find that you're in a position where you need to earn the confidence of a board, B-O-A-R-D, a group of people who aren't on fire with imagination, and they just might want to know, can you write World War II music, son? They just want to know if you can basically connect the dots. And in that case, you may need to come up with a very unimaginative spin on what's been done before, just to get the gig and maybe just to start the gig and get it underway. If you're on a project that's perhaps smaller, or perhaps the game is a little more visionary, or you just suss out that the decision makers have a little more guts, or it might be a case where there's a game that's I think you could look at the new Zelda game, kind of a fresh artistic take on an ancient genre. That might be a good opportunity to break from the body of music and the traditions that have happened so far. But I can't just say like, well, I'll do 40% old and 20% new and 20% wild shit that no one's ever heard, and that's my ratio. It totally depends on the client.
But you do try, right? And Alex as well, Alexander Brandon, you do try to introduce new ideas, I assume?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's been said so far, I think a tie can be made not just to nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, but also for simplicity's sake. And more complex systems, and we dissect things like, let's see how far we can push Ys horizontally, vertically. Let's have things not just crossfade, but be generated dynamically and using this system or that system, or let's motif ourselves to a sort of experience like Zelda. It's really sort of like we hit a wall of 2 hours of orchestral music and take all the stems from that, and then let's take 2 hours of electronic music and then 2 hours of rock, and let's blend them all together in a really unique and interesting way, and have like 5 interactive music guys all doing implementation on that throughout we get to a point where 90% of games don't really think that, first of all, may not think that that knows that that's not feasible from a budget and time standpoint, but they also realize that, well, is that where our heart is? No, not necessarily. I really, like if I'm just starting in an indie community and I started with the SNES, why not make a SNES game using Unity or Unreal with the free assets in the asset store? Let me express myself creatively using a minimum of tools, because even with the minimum of tools and free VSTs and instruments, you can make something pretty darn amazing these days. So people are gravitating in that direction as individuals. And that means that, bigger and bigger companies are just like getting even more stagnated into, and I got to be honest, when you're answering to a bunch of shareholders and you're going, let's see, what's the Infinity Ward, if that's still the company that's working on the Black Ops Call of Duty games. If we're going to be doing if we're going to be doing Call of Duty, we're not going to be going to Harmonix and saying, please design our next game. We're going to be making another Call of Duty. That's as the last one that you played. It's not like it's not going to be fun. There's going to be some new, interesting ideas. They're going to try to break the mold in a couple of different ways, but they have a formula that makes a lot of money, and they're going to keep going with that.
Yeah.
And that's the commercial side of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I want to introduce tools. I want to talk to you about some of the tools that you use for composition. Do you depend upon hardware? Do you depend upon software? Do you go in between? And seeing some pictures of the studio, I see a board. I see a whole console there. Where do you lean? Are you leaning more towards hardware?
Let's take a look.
Oh yeah, a tour. I love this.
Well,
He's literally leaning.
Literally.
So this, can you see that? That's my main controller. Is a Yamaha MOF-X6.
Oh,
It's an 88 key. It's got great action on it. It's got a lot of instruments that I don't use that much.
gotcha.
Over here is the sort of the sledge.
Oh, oh, look at that big old yellow bastard.
And yeah, that's the reason that I got that is because I thought long and hard about what, there's a lot of VSTs that are out there that can achieve some amazing synthetic, some digitally programmed synthesis that emulates analog and whatnot. And that's exactly what this does. The reason that I didn't go with Dave Smith for hardware, other than expense, is because the sledge literally is something that using knobs, as opposed to trying to manipulate something with a mouse or something, can teach you about synthesis from the ground up.
Absolutely, brother.
Absolutely. It has this, yeah, and it has this simple mini Moog, and then you've got your modulation over here, your filter over here. I'm sorry, I'm going pretty fast, and then your envelopes, and then there's these YouTube videos by this old British dude that reproduces Genesis stuff with it. And that's the nostalgia, right? That's the where you're just like, wow, that's amazing. But it's also got the means to add things like pink noise or white noise, some drive, so you get a little bit of distortion. It's got the means to add samplers, and of course, it also has wavetable and FM, in addition to all the standard wave, the simple waves that you would get on something like a Dave Smith. Now, Dave Smith has like VCO control and other aspects to it that really give it sort of like this sort of really thick and rich, deep, more like mid-range to low mid-range type sweetness. So that's not quite as present in Waldorf engine, but so that's sort of my thought process is like, okay, I finally want to be able to take a piece of hardware by itself, immerse myself in that for sound creation, and sort of try to, yes, I can go all Jan Hammer and Miami Vice, and believe me, you can get easily trapped in that world for quite a long time. But it also provides the means to like, create some really, interesting pads that you can, assign to a modulator and then say like, oh, if I shift the wavetable knob back and forth, that's a sound that I haven't really heard before, right? And then I can't just record that, the way I would in a DAW. I actually have to capture it. So it presents, that presents a sort of a new method of sound creation. That is just that's one aspect. Everything else is Omnisphere, Spitfire, your usual VST complements, and a Lexicon reverb and some sound toys, and what most of us are sort of drawn to as far as software goes.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And also, it's a great opportunity to talk about our sponsor, iZotope, because I know I use, and some of the guys here use, and perhaps you do as well. They've got so many creative tools like Iris. I was just using this week, well, last week, because I was in Scotland this week. Last week, I was using Iris. And anyway, thank you, iZotope, for sponsoring the show. We love you, as you well know, and it's also a great tool for using all kinds of creative things. When you use Iris and you can scrape, you can kind of, I say scrape, but you can draw out the area of frequency and time that you want to mess with and create a whole synthesizer out of that. That's pretty amazing stuff. So thank you, iZotope, for sponsoring the show. I wanted to go and also talk about the sledge. First of all, I love Sonic State. That's the whole reason I started the show, is because Sonic State was doing something similar. And they went crazy on the sledge, and I am so jealous that you have one. But the thing that you pointed out that I think is really important is how deep you have to learn your instrument. And I used to be a computer programmer. That's what I did before I got into just doing music for a living full time. And I used to tell people, read your error messages. And because I would find it funny that a piece of software would blow up, the programmer would close the error message and then go, I wonder what happened. And you're like, well, it told you what happened, but you closed the error message. And I apply that same philosophy to every bit of hardware that I have. I want to know exactly what it does, as deep as it goes. I don't close any error messages. I don't ignore any features. I just go as deep in as possible. And once you do that, what you have in front of you could launch rockets to Mars, for Christ's sake, you know, and people don't realize it. They just go with, sometimes they just go with the demo, they go with the basic patches. And another exercise that you didn't touch on, I just wanted to add it to the show, was that I use a Yamaha S90 ES. I love the hell out of that thing.
Nice.
And
nice.
I'm a big fan of John Carpenter movies and the whole sound that he creates for his movies. So one of the first things I did is create the bass end that he puts in his movies, the little weird choir string kind of combination that you always hear in his sound. And all I did was go through all of the different options that you have in the 4 channels that you can create in an S90 ES, and just started figuring out how to sound as close to a John Carpenter movie as possible. And just in doing that, just choose your favorite and just investigate. You will learn so much about your hardware just trying to figure out how to sound like something that already exists. I think it's necessary that people do that. And you touched on that yourself about digging in deep and trying to create these new sounds.
Yeah, and that's how you, at the end of the day, that's how you come up with your own sound. You know, I don't think we could go a whole episode here with Alex and myself without at least once mentioning trackers.
I want to get into that next. Take it over. Go. I want to hear it.
Just to sort of nicely blend into this, so I can seem more calm than I am to have another fellow tracker person on the show here.
Dude, seriously, before you keep going, what was your handle?
My handle? No, I was in Australia, so we didn't really have a demo scene in Australia. We were consumers.
There's Giannis Brown, right? And then there's also Firelight, who started FMod.
True, but that's
wow.
That's a never mind. We'll get to that anyway.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Anyway, what was I going to say? Yes. So the whole idea of learning your gear is essentially the way you come up with your own sound. And as a fine example, before I get onto trackers, is there are loads of guitarists and bassists out there, left-handed, who play with the strings upside down, right? And they are amazing. And as I play bass, and seeing these bassists who can play, basically the reason it's like that is because they pick up a bass, it's a right-handed bass or guitar, and it's like, I don't know, I decided to play it like this. And they flip the whole thing upside down, and they just get used to playing with the strings upside down. And extend that on like 10, 15, 20 years. Now they have all of these amazing chops and skills that regular guitarists can't touch because they're playing their instrument upside down. And they'll still prefer to have, the low E string up the top instead of down the bottom, right? So that's when you come down to sort of electronic music or music production in general, if you're able to find one thing that you really love and to sort of pummel that thing day after day and get to the absolute bottom of how it works, then essentially what you're doing after, again, you have to be patient and it takes, years, but after several years, you kind of, you find yourself at that point where, oh, actually the way that I use this thing is kind of different from everybody else. And you may not realize it, but that's become sort of your sound. And when it comes to trackers, that's one thing that I personally the reason that I still use a tracker these days. So Alex, I started on Noise Tracker on the Amiga, and then went through all of the Amiga. So Noise Tracker, then Star Tracker, and then Sound Tracker, and then Pro Tracker, and then Octamed, and then Med, then Octamed, and then
don't forget Geo Tracker.
Geo Tracker, and I never used that one.
I'm kidding. It's a stupid thing. No.
Alex, did you ever use MusicCalc?
No, I didn't. I used I used Music X on the Amiga, but that was a horizontal DAW. Anyway, so sort of coming to the point now. Now I'm using Renoise, which is kind of pretty much the only choice when it comes to like fully featured, proper industry grade DAW tracker. The interesting thing that I find personally is that just because the nature of how you write music with a tracker, and you've got a pattern, right? You have a pattern. You put everything in the pattern. You can see all of your notes in columns as you go across. For people who are not familiar with how trackers work, it's just like a pianola thing, like an Excel spreadsheet that scrolls up, and you can see all the notes of the whole lot of music along one row.
Don't go into marketing, man.
Yeah, there's no double clicking on little clips and opening windows and nothing like that. It's all just right there. So I often get compliments, thankfully, amazingly, I often get compliments on the bass lines and the drums that I write for my music. Like people often say, wow, your bass lines and the drums, they kind of gel together really nicely. And when people say that, I'm really happy, because the reason that is simply because this is the tool that I use. And obviously when you have all of your drums, all of your bass line, everything all visible all at once, it's really easy to sort of get counterpoint and to make sure things are locking in with a kick in certain places, and sort of, putting the bass line into gaps in between the rhythm and stuff like that. It's just really, really easy when you're doing it in a tracker. And so that, again, is just a nice sort of, it's a nice benefit you get from using the one tool that much. So yeah, definitely. I think Alex mentioned just a moment ago, we have like all of this gear these days. You've got all of this, it's just so much gear, and it's fantastic. And it's a great time to be working in music. There's so many options. There's so much cool stuff that we can do, but it's really, really important not to be distracted. And it's so easy to get distracted. And all artists, I mean I'm talking to you, all artists, when you get bored, you just get distracted and you start thinking about workflow, and maybe this synth sounds better than this one, or maybe this effect plugin is the one that I need that will, that's going to be my solution. It's all just distraction. When you're really busy, you got like one day to make a soundtrack. Okay, it's on. What are you going to use? Yeah. Forget the faff. Okay, I'm going to use this DAW, this reverb, this synth. Right, we're going at it. These are the tools that you actually need to focus on. That's what I think, anyway.
I think it's very well put. I think it's important to, even as we explore or follow the lure of new plugins or sound libraries, to stay focused on our core palette and to keep it kind of on the forefront of our mind, so we're fresh and we know where everything is. It's like having an office where you know the location of everything. You can just grab it when you need it. Not to say, however, I do believe in expanding the palette gradually when opportunity arises, but in an organic way, so you can kind of integrate the new stuff you buy rather than go crazy buying stuff and not really knowing what to do with it.
Amen.
Amen.
It's absolutely fine to get into gear. Absolutely. I love, as you guys know, I have like every vintage compressor plugin there is out there, and every sort of analog emulation EQ plugin that there is. I have them all. So it's great, but it's just important not to be distracted by it. That's not the reason that your music sucks.
You know what I'd like to do?
Yep.
You know what I'd like to do? And I'm sorry, Alex, just one thing before you speak. I'm sorry about that. I would love to put together on this show a list of the 5 plugins that we use the most. We have plugins out our ears, but what are the ones that we always end up using? I think it'd be a very useful.
Let's do like a Pensado's play.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
What's it called?
Like Pensado's place.
What's it called? That baseball thing that he does?
Yeah, the baseball thing. Yeah.
Batter's box.
Batter's box. That's it. So
Exactly.
we've covered so much, and we're running out of time. I have to interject. First of all, like Pensado, like they always say, will you be back on the show, Alex? Because we could not possibly cover your career in this amount of time.
Of course. I mean, yeah.
That'd be lovely.
Say when, say where. Man.
Oh man. So here's the thing. I want to get some time in on this. So
yeah, what is this?
I went out to get my special little thing.
It's this new piece of gear.
It's not gear. It's one of my absolute favorite RPGs. Numenera, and somebody we know just did the soundtrack for Tides of Numenera from Torment. Now, it's a combination of this RPG and kind of, what do they call it, the historical ancestor or something to the Planescape game, which was the thing I was going to get out, but I have it in storage. So can you tell me a little bit about that project you were doing with Tides of Numenera?
Oh, geez, yeah. Well, that was Torment was a project that started after Wasteland 2. Wasteland 2 had Monty, Montgomery.
Monty Cook.
No, not Monty.
Oh,
Cox.
sorry.
He was the producer. I'm gonna be so embarrassed because I actually can't remember his last name, and it's awful because like we
Wait a
worked
minute, Monty
together at Obsidian.
Mudd?
You know what? Hold on. Because I happen to have my phone at the exact same time, I can look like I'm actually talking to you guys while I actually fire up.
No worries, man. We are all older.
Oh, wait, no. I didn't even need to look it up. Montgomery Markland. Okay, so Monty Markland at the time said, hey, let's get Alex onto Wasteland. And I hadn't played the original Wasteland, even though my friend had it for the Apple. But I knew of its history, and I was fascinated by that. We did. I had Levon Lewis helping me out. He's working with me at Funky Rustic at the time. We did sound design on, and I integrated the music by Mark Morgan. He did a very good job on that. So that led into Torment, which was bigger. And so the fun of that project was, I mean, the sound design was primarily the work that I did. But instead of just doing the sounds and just plopping them in, I acted more as an audio director. As I was able to get Wise as integrated into the project with Unity, which is a story in and of itself. Because while Unity has a foundation of allowing people to do things simply, a larger scale project nightmare in terms of like just something as simple as load times.
Yeah.
But even so, like the team did like a fantastic job. The writing team is the star because they created a story that is just like the original Planescape is so different. And you're just like, whoa, you know, I'm a character that is like just a body that is containing the consciousness of this changing god that decided to extend his life over however many thousands of years. And I am just the latest in this series of what's called cast-offs, or bodies that this changing god uses. And then after he casts it off and decides to pick another body, it gains its own sentience and its own set of memories. So the game is about maneuvering through memories, maneuvering through not just your memories, but other memories in order to ascertain exactly why this sort of what is at first seen as an evil force called the Sorrow is tracking the changing god because of the tides. That's why it's called Tides of Numenera. It's sort of like the equivalent of the Force, except there's different tides that influence different aspects of decisions that you make. So we had, from the beginning, I had to guide Mark Morgan through, it's like, okay, so if there's tides, and just like Vincent was saying, like, you know, we had to look at the systems of the game, and since tides were a very influential part of that, we had to have, you know, the music gradually change based on the decisions the player makes and the tides that they align themselves with. Aspect of that, but like I said, I mean, the sound and the music weren't really discussed nearly all that much in the reviews, and neither was the artwork. It was the story, and that's what I'm not out there, you know, like, oh well, you know, it was a great project to work on, but it was because just like with Unreal, you know, like people. Or even Deus Ex, you know, like people say, oh, soundtrack. I'm like, it's porting what the player was trying to do in its own feeble way at the time with the systems we had. But the reason that I loved being a part of that game is because I loved playing it. So like, that's not true of every project that we work on, and Torment is definitely one of those.
You know, but it's something to be said about how good the soundtrack is, that it just supports the overall vision of what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Mark's an interesting guy. I'm sorry to imitate his voice here for a little bit. He works with like Snuffy Walden on like major TV shows like Under the Dome, and so I'll be on the phone with him talking about his massive synthesizers and like, you know, his modulars that he uses for creating soundscapes and other things like that. But like he also says, and I don't think he'll mind me saying this, I don't know how you game guys do it. Like, you know, like you work so hard, and the money's really not that much, like compared to television. And
he sounds like Woody Allen.
It's not kind of. It's not like I'm saying, oh, Mark Morgan thinks the game guys, you know, are living in the poorhouse by any means. But like, what I do want to do is have a sort of private conversation about, like, you know, if I could interview you or have him on Game Audio Hour, talking about, hey, here's some differences between the TV industry and the film industry, then it would be great to sort of break down some barriers. You know, same with Bear McCreary, right? I have a feeling that if you can actually in 2 seconds, that he'd be happy to wax lyrical on the differences that he's seen as well. But like, anyway, yeah, no, but his soundtrack was great. Admittedly, the first suggestion that I had was a reference from the Dark Crystal, which is the theme from the Dark Crystal, which is one of my favorite themes of all time. I mean, it's just brilliantly written. Trevor, is it
Rabin?
Trevor Jones, right? Yes. No, Trevor Rabin was the yes.
Oh boy.
Right.
And then there's another Trevor that did Trevor Horn, right?
Trevor Horn.
Oh.
That was also in the
Tormato.
There's
Watch
too many
out.
Trevors in the UK, but no, this Trevor. But this Trevor that did the Dark Crystal. Anyway, I presented that to Mark. You were saying has his signature style, and essentially what they were going for was sort of some of what made Planescape Torment unique followed through into this Torment. Now I was able to influence the nature of what the tracks needed to do and the length and how they integrated and wise was up to me. But at the very least, the fans loved it. Like they essentially, they got the score, they listened to it, and it satisfied the fans of the original Planescape, being as far as instrumentation goes, and
Such a great
style
game.
and composition.
Such a great game, and I tell everybody play Planescape, but also play Torment. Amazing stuff, amazing music, amazing writing. There are few places that games will go, and we think of things like Zelda, and we think of things like Doom that we've talked about today that are these major franchises in the game industry, but also coming out of that gold box era into Planescape, moving on into Torment. That is another avenue that if you haven't examined or if you haven't enjoyed, please check it out, get in there and listen to the amazing music that's being written and the amazing storytelling that's being done. That's my favorite genre. As between Civilization, which I will never give up on, and anything that came out of the gold box era. That's it. I only need 2 games for the rest of my life. I need more Civilization. I need more Baldur's Gate kind of gold box originated RPGs, and I'm done. What the hell?
Curse of the Azure Bonds, man. Where's our modernized Curse of the Azure Bonds?
Are you kidding me? I swear to God, I was in college and also in the military in Germany, and my parents said to me, "Are you coming home on your 30 days leave?" And I said, "No, I'm going to stay here and play Pool of Radiance." So this is a true story. I sat on my Commodore. I sat on my Commodore 64 in Moorbach, Germany, just playing through that entire thing. Screw them for Christmas.
Wow.
That's the best stuff ever. Anyway, guys, thanks for being on the show. Alex, thanks for joining us. We're going to have to do this again because we just couldn't cover everything. I actually was secretly before the show, to tell people who didn't know, I was in the green room. While we were in the green room, I was trying to collect as many games that Alex has written as possible, but I don't have the strength to carry them all. And so we definitely want to have you back on and just talk about more of your experience and things that you've been through. Thanks for giving us a little bit of that joy that you have and some of your time. And guys, thanks for being on the show. It can't go without saying, Alex May, it was so fantastic to see you back in here. Please, anytime you're free, keep doing it. Keep coming back.
The pleasure was all mine.
Totally. Thank you.
And what a great show. Thanks for having us. Thanks for being on the show, I should say. And I guess at this point I wrap up for my spaghetti dinner, which is traditional Monday nights. I tell you that this week's scotch was brought to you by Anach, which is what I fell in love with in Scotland. If you want to try new scotch, try that one. I didn't know it existed until I just got back from my 10-day Scottish vacation, and it was pretty amazing. I think that's it. I think it covers everything in my brain list of things I wanted to cover. Thanks everybody for being on the show.
All right.
Fun as always.
Later, and thanks, chatties. Like us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitters, and friend us on Friendster if that thing still exists.
Don't forget Orchid.
Space us on MySpace, and I don't know. Do those things that make us popular, because we keep bringing you good content if you keep following, and we love you for doing it. And thanks thanks Isotope. Okay, bye.
RX